Well, in the ongoing quest for being a true truther, whatever the hell that is, to tell you the truth. Hey, Continental Congress meets for the first time 1774 in response to Parliament. In other words, the British Parliament's Coercive Acts. The Coercive Acts were a series of acts that were passed against the colonies in response to the Boston Tea Party of 1773, December 1773. Immediately thereafter, Parliament in the UK passed what was called the Coercive Acts, which was known in the colonies as the intolerable acts, because they just couldn't be put up with. It's amazing the kind of stuff people put up with today that people would not have even put up one iota of with back then. You know, like getting in the airport and having to put up with all the security and stuff. I don't even go on a plane for that reason. I'll say to hell with them. The First Continental Congress met in response to Parliament's Coercive Acts, which were passed and punished the colonists for the Boston Tea Party. The Coercive Acts shut down the Massachusetts government and replaced it with a military dictatorship. Pretty extreme, huh? So, talk about martial law, that's what happened back then. It also shut down the Boston Harbor until the tea was paid for. Yeah, fat chance that was going to happen. It made British officials immune from prosecution. Whoa, isn't that wonderful? It required colonists to house British troops. You know, that's why we, started getting the Bill of Rights, because, about quartering troops and all this kind of stuff like that. So, I want to actually make a couple more comments about this, because, one of the things they got today in a conservative, quote unquote, circles. I'm neither a conservative or a liberal. I'm probably more of a revolutionary reactionary, if you really want to label it somehow. It's like, first off, I don't care about conserving what's going on today, because everything today is overbearing. It's too much. And, when people talk about law abiding and all this kind of garbage, I mean, these laws are totally unjust. It's amazing how everybody has to comply with everything. How did this country get conformed? People weren't complying, period. And I'm not just talking about some feel-good protest garbage out in the streets, where nothing's going to happen to you or something. These people actually took life and limb in their hands to get this country going. And basically, this country originally was lack of government, as limited and as weak a government as possible with checks and balances. So, you got to have a little bit of freaking government, but it looks like, it's actually turned out where even a little bit of government is just going to grow into something too big and unwieldy no matter what you do. So maybe, I don't know what you could do about all this, but actually the point we're at today, it's beyond ridiculous. So 54 delegates convened at Carpenter's Hall in Philadelphia, which is the capital at the time, not the Washington, D.C. Philadelphia was the capital of the United States, or the colonies. The delegates had been chosen through various means in 12 colonies. Georgia was still loyal to King George at that time, but that changed pretty quickly after that. Some, such as Patrick Henry, wanted to declare independence immediately. It turned out he was right. So, the other thing was that they put down what is called the Suffolk Resolves. The resolves contain strong language to advocate a boycott of British goods, disobedience to the Coercive Acts, and resignation of anybody appointed under the Acts, and refusal to pay taxes until the Acts were repealed. The Suffolk Resolves were also supported the creation of a separate government in Massachusetts. It sounds like Massachusetts needs to do this again, because I think somehow the dictators have taken over that state quite a while ago. But the thing is, people were not afraid to really communicate with each other, and not only just communicate and just talk about something, but, hey, total civil disobedience. It gets me, remember after 9/11, there were so many laws that passed, Patriot Act, and, security on the airports. Everybody knows 911 was a nut with the freaking, they tell you in the major media. It's quite obvious, for crying out loud. Look at Building 7, right? But how come people still fly? I mean, even if say you got to take a plane once in a while, but You could call them up and say, hey, you know what? I'm not taking a plane. I tell them this. I tell them this, but most people don't. I'm not taking a plane because you got dumb rules. It's like the hell with them. But people get used to it and they comply. People back then in the colonies, I guess it's sort of like Americans back then in 1770s were kind of like what the Australians were, they finally broke away from the crown. Too bad they didn't have a Bill of Rights too. But the Americans actually at that time had a lot more backbone. So the Continental Congress publicly, advocated to disobey, the punitive laws or, the coercive acts or whatever you want to call them. The colonies call them the punitive laws. And they openly said, don't pay the taxes, don't listen to anybody that's appointed under these acts or anything like that, and hell with it. And also, Congress took the advice of Suffolk Resolves and encouraged each colony to begin raising its militia and securing supplies and ammunition in case that physical resistance became necessary. Now, I want to point out, there was no Second Amendment at this time. This is one of the things that gets me about a lot of these people talking about the Second Amendment. Okay, there was no Second Amendment when the American Revolution went on. There wasn't any. This came afterwards. And supposedly, the Federalists were saying, we don't need this Bill of Rights because it clearly states in the Constitution what the limits of government are. Well, good thing they had these Bill of Rights, because if they didn't have them, we'd have already been sunk a long time ago. But the Second Amendment actually implies that, and it's related to this, because this is where the colonies started putting up resistance to the British coercive acts or the intolerable acts. A well-regulated militia being everybody that's capable of bearing arms. Supposedly I'd be overage, but hey, believe me, I ain't. Being necessary to the security of a free state. That's us. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now, how they also talk about, and I'm going to throw this, ad-lib this in here, how they argue that, well, an AR-15 is not a military weapon. You show any military, yeah, of course it's not a military weapon, but you know what? The Second Amendment is telling that everybody should have a military-grade weapon. They shouldn't just have an AR-15. They should have an, what do you call it, M16A2. They should have that. They should have a military, just like Switzerland. I think Switzerland has that. But you know what? Regardless of any country, even if they have this or not. Well, Israel has this. I think Israel has this. I think the citizens got military-grade weapons. But well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. Now, a well-regulated militia. If it's a militia, they got military weapons. You see how these idiots they're arguing that, it's a semi-automatic. Well, I don't have a full automatic, but what I'm saying is we should have the right to have this free and clear. No rules. That's where I'm coming from. We're the militia. And then you know what? You can fire 90% of the freaking military. You don't even need them. Yeah, thank you for your service. Great. Yeah, I was in the USMC 13 years. I'm not bragging about anything or saying one thing one way or the other, but I can tell you one thing. Most of the stuff I learned was on my own, not from training. It's like people that go in there actually make it happen, not versus them making it happen, the government making it happen. That's the really way it works. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And the people being the militia, that means not AR-15s, that means military-grade weapons. That's what this thing really says. And even Gun Owners of America doesn't even say that. I say that. But this is what you got. This is your average revolutionary right here, standing on a rock, standing tall. And of course, he's got his Harley Davidson motorcycle behind him, except, whatever. But the Congress shall encourage each colony to begin raising its militia and securing supplies and ammunition in the case of physical resistance becomes necessary. And actually, this is what happened during, from the invasion of the North later on, not even 80 years later, 1861. The invasion of the North. South tried to break away and try to be independent. The North invaded. So that's exactly what happened there. My lineage. I'm even from New Jersey, New York area originally. My lineage goes back to South Carolina all the way to this time in Shershawah County. It's Marlboro and Darlington County today. But this was part of the American Revolution. Actually, most of the American Revolution was won in the southern states: South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia. Most of those states. The Over Mountain Boys and all that. So later, just right after this happened, fighting had already broken out in Lexington and Kentucky. Within a month, Congress would create the Continental Army and appoint George Washington as commander-in-chief, and fight for independence would begin. Now, I also want to point out at this time that the Congress supposedly sent letters to the other colonies: Quebec, Nova Scotia, East and West Florida, and Prince Albert Island, right? But it would have been interesting, because if that would have happened, they would have all joined in the revolution. All of Canada would not have been, they wouldn't have these coins today with the Queen on them, That'd be the end of that. But, I also got to tell you that, I think people are a little bit too afraid of authority. Now, you should be afraid of authority because they got the force. But just remember this, here's a picture of Jesus being nailed to the cross. Now, you can look at it two different ways. You can look at it as a Christian, and, you think this one way, another way. I look at it as a little bit different. I look at him as, Rabbi Jesus, who was a Jew. He was a great prophet and a great teacher and healer. And he was one of hundreds of Jews that the psychotic Pontius Pilate, at the behest of Nero, who was another nut job, was killing off and crucifying all these Jews because they might cause trouble. At any hint of trouble, he would do this. But what happens? What do they do? The ones that are actually enforcing this? Just doing my job, nailing them to the cross. Just doing my job. Just doing my job. You know what I'm saying? Communists obeying politicians. Basically, that's what you got. Now, obviously, you can't be stupid and going against this, brick wall directly, but I'm just pointing it out to you, just how corrupt the whole damn system is. And the example of Jesus, you could take it different ways. You could take it as a Jew. You could look at it as a Jew and say, Jesus was a victim of, stupid kiss-ass politics from Pontius Pilate sucking up to Nero. And he was one of hundreds of Jews that got crucified in this manner. Believe it or not, he wasn't the only one. Or he could take it as, Christian and say, well, he was crucified by the Romans and Pontius Pilate and all this, but you could take it that way. But either way you take it, the people that enforce whatever they're doing, they don't think. They're like robots. They don't think what's right. They don't think what's wrong. They're like, just doing my job. Later on, you got the same people later on with funny-looking helmets in World War II that are doing the same kind of thing to people. You understand? And this is where, when you're talking freedom, you can't be just freaking sucking up to authority all the time. That's one of the things that how our country was born. We did not suck up to authority. And even if you obey authority, you get a nut job in there, they'll nail you to the cross anyway, even if you obey authority. What did Jesus do wrong? Nothing. I know the twist that the Christians put on it, but let me put it to you this way. This guy had this Pontius Pilate had a half an ounce of brains or any kind of honor in him, he wouldn't have had this done. But he was a weasel, right? And like I told you, Jesus was not the only Jew that they nailed to the cross by Pontius Pilate. Hundreds of them were. Hundreds were. Because Pontius Pilate was kissing up to freaking Nero, who was another nut job. But that's your law enforcement right there. That's law enforcement. That's authority. Now, I'm not talking about the feel-good garbage that you see on the campuses and stuff like that. And you go, well, the next thing they're going to do is tear down a statue of this guy, you know, standing for the American Revolution because some Marxist history professor told them some lies, just like they're doing with the Confederates, right? But my point is that, you know, the only way you're actually going to make significant change is you're going to have to disobey authority. I mean, you can't be stupid about it, obviously. You know, I mean, don't be a moron about it, but obviously you just can't go along with everything. And you shouldn't, and even when you're making an argument about this, you know, first off, remember during the American Revolution, there was no Second Amendment. There wasn't any. You know, today everybody's hiding behind the Second Amendment. And actually today, everybody is, even the ones that are pro-Second Amendment, are arguing like, well, it's not a military-grade weapon. Well, guess what? The Second Amendment's telling you that everybody should have a military-grade weapon, not just a semi-automatic, because we are the well-regulated militia, we the people. And we guarantee the security of the state. The state doesn't hire mercenaries like we got today to guarantee the security of the money interest, which is really what's going on. You know, that's why they don't like the Confederacy. The next step they're going to do is after the American Revolution. Guarantee you that. Oh, they'll say all these people are evil next. That's what the Marxists will be doing. So I want to bring this out, and this was like, again, this was the first time the Continental Congress met in response to Parliament's Coercive Acts, which the Americans call the Intolerable Acts, whatever, you know. But, you know, what did they do? What did they do? They said, flat out, we're just going to disobey everything, you know, the king says. We're not going to pay the taxes. We're not going to list any of his appointees. We're going to arm ourselves. We're going to get ready for conflict. And, in the case of Patrick Henry, it took a while for debates to actually come to this conclusion. He was like, declare independence immediately. That was Patrick Henry. To hell with him. Turned out he was right, wasn't he? He would have been considered extremist, but you know what? He was more perceptive of the situation before the others caught on to it later on. But again, you know, if you're a good guy and, you know, I know you could say, if you're Christian, you'll say Jesus is the Messiah. You know, somebody else might say he was a great Jewish rabbi, teacher, and healer. Didn't do nothing wrong. He could be doing nothing wrong, and he'll still screw you over because somebody's worried about what might happen because he's a politically connected piece of garbage. That would have been Pontius Pilate and Nero. But you got that going on today, left and right. And the people that carry out the orders, they're not going to give a damn. They don't care. They just doing my job. Just doing my job. Right? That's why people got to grow some once in a while. And that's not the same as saying what these college students are doing, because those people are some of the biggest cowards going. To get out there in the middle of the night and they tear down some statue, but they don't even have a clue what it stands for. Like I said, the next thing they're going to be doing is going to be going after the American Revolutionary statues. In both cases, 1776 and 1861, it was a fight for independence and freedom. Both cases. Of course, if you look at British history today, they'll tell you something completely different. And if you look at Northern history today about the South, they'll tell you something completely different. But the reality is, it was a situation where people were not going to put up with the status quo, what was going on, that they were being taxed to death, and once they tried to break free, they came down with the hammer. One case it was King George, the other case it was Abe Lincoln. So, but you look at it, were these people obeying all the authorities out there? No, they were doing the exact opposite, weren't they? But I said, you got to be smart about it. You just can't go out there like an idiot and just, I'm going to stand, they showed a Chinese guy standing in front of the tank at Tiananmen Square, but that could have worked out a little different, you know what I mean? And there's a lot of times maybe that's one time it worked out, but there was probably thousands of times it didn't work out that way. So you obviously got to be a little more shrewd than just taking a stand. You got to take a shrewd stand. Obviously, one of the things we got today is that even the conservatives, or whatever the hell you want to call those yo-yos, I don't really like them. They're too afraid to take a stand on anything. And, I'm not really a conservative, I can tell you that right now, because I just think government should have total hands off of everything anybody wants to do, man. You shouldn't be a debate on, who uses what bathroom or some crap. Just do whatever the hell you want, man. If there was no government schools, we wouldn't even have this debate. You just go to the school that you like. You pay for the school, and the hell with it, man. You just don't have taxes as much, right? That's the way I look at it. What the hell you got to regulate all this crap for? You know what I mean? Got a freaking bunch of brainwashing camps instead of schools, right? I mean, everything's like controlled all the way. So I don't think that, I don't like the politics between the liberals and the conservatives. I don't like any of that stuff. It's like, I think you just, to hell with it. We don't need all this garbage. It's just, we're free, we're free. We just need a hell of a lot less people telling us what we should do and what we want to do and what we got to pay and what we got to regulate, and what the hell with it, man. It's like, as long as you're not interfering with the economic freedoms of somebody else or whatever, or what, you're not interfering with their lives, you're telling them what to do. Do whatever the hell you want. That's how Southern California used to be, by the way. Used to be great. Great, man. Fantastic. I don't know what the hell happened today, man. It's like today, it's related to this American Revolution. Back in the day, in Southern California, you could do, on a beach, you could do anything. You could have a bonfire. I mean, you could do anything. Throw beer bottles out there. Nobody, people were a little more, considerate of each other, Today, you go on a beach, no smoking, no this, no eating, no drinking, no this and that, right? Does that make that's screwed up. That's screwed up. That's kind of like the beach compared to the whole everything in the government and everything across the nation. But it's like that. It's like we got more rules that supposedly make us safe and make us everything fine, and it's ridiculous. We don't need this garbage. But I personally, if it gets to be too many rules in a certain place, I'll go somewhere else. That's the way I look at it. I personally think that, the South has been better than the North for the most part, but the more people from the North coming down South, it's screwing it up. And I'm not one of those guys, no. I can tell you I'm more freaking Southerner in spirit than Southerners are for the most part. But, people got to get some backbone once in a while and not go along with everything. The revolutionaries, that's how they did it, man. They just said no. They said, the hell with this crap. We're not doing it. Sorry. That was the end. Over and out.